the things I'm going to tell you is that I am a practicing lawyer, and right now I'm actually embroiled in a race discrimination case in Northern California. So despite a campaign, I'm kind of in the middle of a different kind of war, if you will. So I am nearly 50 years old, and I have 3 children, 22. My son's getting ready to be 18, and my daughter, youngest, is going to be 9. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. My father was a teamster and a bus driver, and my mother worked in the subway collecting fares. She came from Germany, and because they met when my father served in the Army, but basically I was born in a black community, raised in a black family for what was the most of my formative life. And I actually moved out to California because my grandmother at the time had retired from her job, and she made the big decision post-retirement as a senior to try and move to California, and it was an awfully tough transition for her. So at that time, nearly 30 years ago, I was one of, I could come. So I came to help her get settled into a new church and all of those kind of things. So that's what brought me to California. I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 6 years old, because growing up on the south side of Chicago, I actually realized that I lived in a community that didn't have lawyers, but when people seemed to have problems, they wanted and tried to find a lawyer, and they were in short supply. I also grew up, I tell people, in the shadows of the work that people did to move the ball forward of the civil rights movement. So I was really kind of in the shadows and the first wave, if you will, of people who actually got the benefit of that. Some educational opportunities that we didn't have, which is appropriate to talk about today on the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. Lawyers like Thurgood Marshall were my hero. And so I realized that Brown versus Board of Education, for instance, didn't just happen. It came from decades of people who stood up, who had education, who had a little bit more, who had opportunity, who had backbone, and did things that they didn't have to do. And if they didn't do those things, we literally, with me, would not be having this conversation today. So I understand that with that benefit comes the responsibility to try and do something myself. So today is really, for me, a big, big day. I also realized, though, that the world is changing, and while Thurgood Marshall was my hero, Clarence Thomas is not. And so our work is not done, and it is really up to people like me who have had so many opportunities to do so much. I went to night school for 8 years, working full-time during the day, and got a degree in business and accounting. I went on to law school and went to day school and to night school and any other kind of school I could go to. And like many people, I got out with more than $100,000 in student loan debt, because although my family wanted the best for me, they really had no idea how to navigate this landscape that would be higher education and certainly keeping food on the table and a roof over their head. They didn't have any extra money to put away for college. But I made it through. I'm not complaining. I was able to pay off my student loans for 20 years. More than 20 years, I have, as a lawyer, done 2 things. I hope help people and been on the right side of justice. So as I said, right now I'm embroiled in an extensive race discrimination case that I have been actually battling on behalf of 9 African American workers for more than 5 years, and against the 3rd largest defense contractor in our world, actually. And I will tell you that it's just a great example of what we go through, which is they do everything they can, throw everybody they can. They have more resources than anybody can positively imagine. So ultimately, what has made me successful as a lawyer is understanding that, you know what, you got to stand up and fight. I have to stand up and use my God-given talents, which is somewhat of a brain and a large part of a mouth. I'm just going to tell you, okay? Growing up on the south side of Chicago, I got very scrappy very quickly, okay? And I used that in the law on behalf of my clients. So I've been about really community action, mother action, legal action, and now I am moving into political action. Why am I doing that? Not because I want to be a politician, to be quite frank with you. I'm doing that because as a voter, as a mother, as a person who gets it and cares about what is happening, I didn't actually see a candidate who actually had the backbone to go to Sacramento and say, I am going to be a strong voice for the people of the 62nd Assembly District. I am going to be a strong voice for seniors. I am going to care about and actually make something happen in terms of how kids get education. As a parent, I know it is more than a notion to try and get a kid educated today. We need to have the conditions for education. The conditions come from money. It comes from local control. In the 62nd Assembly District, we have a multitude of children, which means we don't need the same money that they need in other districts. We need more money because our challenges are greater, and quite frankly, we're coming from further behind as it relates to public education. Why do I think I'm going to be successful when all these other politicians go and are not successful? Because the job of being a state assembly person really includes two things which are completely in my skill set. Number one, making and changing laws, right? That is what they do. You need to understand what laws are, how they're made, how ordinary words actually have a whole different meaning when you put them into a law, and the law of unintended consequences is big. So I don't want to have to rely on somebody else to tell me what the law is. I have a law degree. In fact, I have 2 law degrees because 10 years later I went and got another law degree in social justice. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to understand what the role was of lawyers and the law in social justice movements. We know things like, going back with you all, the Montgomery bus boycott. Yes, people boycotted. Yes, people marched, but the lawyers were always there, and they had a role. And we have forgotten, really, as lawyers, that we have a role to play. Not the main role to play in mass movements and moving the ball forward, but we do have a role to play. And quite frankly, because we've forgotten that in Sacramento, the rules are not necessarily on our side. Right? The rules that are going to support a good education are not on our side. The rules that are going to support health care are not on our side. The rules that are going to maintain that people can have a fair job at a fair wage where they can support themselves and have a pension and Medicare and things into their retirement, those rules have changed. And right now they want to change them even more. My mother is 74 years old. She's battling cancer right now. I told you she was a transit worker. And what is sustaining her today is that she has her pension, which she worked for in the subways of Chicago, which she earned herself with her sweat equity. And now in the state of California, for people who are similarly situated like her, state employees, they want to take that pension. They essentially want to change the rules after the game has been played on the people who can least afford it the most.